So we set up recording. So just a little note for those that will be listening to this after the study, I would suggest, because we are continuing with 2 Samuel 22, that you guys listening to this, if you haven't listened to last week's, I would stop listening to this, go back to last week's, and then come back to this, because we are very much going to continue with it. So yeah, just to say. So we are going to continue with 2 Samuel chapter 22. I did almost think that we should just read the whole thing again, but I don't think we will. But hopefully, most of you heard that, or was at the session last week. So, but we will just refresh our memories as to what we were doing last week and what we're looking at. So if we put that 2 Samuel 22 in front of us, that would be useful. So first question is, what kind of writing did we read in this 2 Samuel chapter 22? What kind of writing was it?
Like a poem.
Like a poem, yes, a poem. It was written like a poem and a song, wasn't it? It was a phrase, a song of praise, which is very helpful because that's what it's got the title of as well. So that's always very helpful. So just thinking about what we looked at last week, we were talking about the fact that David has written this, and we can also read this in Psalm 18, I believe it is. So whether he sang it or, or said it, I don't know. I mean, it says it's a song of praise, so it seems to indicate, I'm just going to let Marina in. There she goes. It seems to indicate that it is a song maybe to be sung. And I was thinking also that David was obviously, he was quite musical, wasn't it? Because he played the harp to songs. So he obviously knows how to do a bit of music. So this is a song that he maybe sung, he would have sung. And we had some discussion, didn't we, whether he would have sung it just to the Lord or whether he would have sung it to other people. But I think do we not agree that although it is a song that he is singing to the Lord, because it says that in verse 22, David sang to the Lord. The fact that we're reading it means that actually we're also hearing this song as well. And although we maybe don't know the tune, if you want to write a tune to it, feel free. So Sophie, if you're listening, write a tune, that'd be great. But it was a song that he sang to the Lord, and we can enjoy those and learn from it as well as we look at it. So we also looked last week at the very poetic language, didn't we, that David used in this. He uses this poetic language to like paint a picture. So they weren't literal things, but they were things to help us understand, I suppose, what he's saying, what he's been through, but also, I guess, for him to express how he was feeling as well. So can you remember looking at these verses here? Can you remember some of those sorts of pictures, those poetic languages that he used last week in the study? Shout them out.
I did wonder what a cherub was.
A cherubim, wasn't it?
11.
In verse 11.
Was it a chubby baby or something?
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? And we were thinking it's probably not a chubby baby. It's probably something a little bit more magnificent than that, I would imagine. So there was the cherubim in verse 11. Any other sort of descriptive words that he used?
Well, the waves of death swirled about me.
Yeah.
And the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me.
Yeah. And if we think of the sea and the waves and the torrents, it's sort of it really pictures what he was going through at that moment, doesn't it? What he was explaining. Any other things that we can think of looking at that passage? Is this a good way to refresh our minds?
What about the Lord being a rock and fortress and a refuge, and someone take refuge and a shield or a wall, so that would be an indication of the Lord being a rescue and salvation.
Yeah, definitely. So a rock and a fortress, somewhere that we take refuge. That shield, isn't it, of protection as well, isn't it? Form of salvation. yeah, a real place of refuge. Thank you.
Yes, the Lord thundered through the sky, and the voice of Almighty God was heard. It goes on, when the Lord rebuked his enemies and roared at them in anger.
Yeah, so they're very powerful words, aren't they? Of what was going on there. So,
And in contrast, in verse
Thunder.
13, the earth was radiant with his brightness.
yeah,
So we've had the visions of the darkness of
Yeah.
that, but in verse 13, we've got the more positive
Yeah.
thing.
yeah. So at verse 13 says, out of the brightness of his presence, bolts of lightning blazed forth. Yeah, so there's a lot going on there, isn't there? Lots of light and brightness. Yeah. Yeah, so there was a whole load of things there, wasn't there? That words that David used to sort of describe often his distress, the things that he was having to face. He uses this very sort of this picture language to paint a picture. We also looked at David looked back at how he called to the Lord, and the Lord heard his cry. So we're reminded of that he looked back at the things that that happened to him, that he had cried to the Lord, and the Lord had heard his cry. We saw also last week that David was no superhero, was he? He wasn't without emotion. How did he react to these things? How can we see that he was no superhero? Or, can you remember that?
He was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
First way, then torrents of destruction.
Yeah.
So he couldn't necessarily cope with it.
Yeah. So he was overwhelmed. We've got these words here, overwhelmed and things. So
Distress.
yeah, distress. Yeah, distress. So we can often look at some of these people in the Bible and sort of almost think, well, we often do like kids things, don't we? Heroes of the Bible. But, yes, they were in a sense heroes, and David was one of those, but we see that he was actually very, he had emotions, he had struggles, there was troubles that he faced the heart. It wasn't trouble, and the fact we call them troubles means that they're hard. Don't say it's a trouble, but it was really easy to cope with, or whatever. Normally, a trouble means really something very hard, isn't it, to cope with? And I think that's what David was experiencing, all these emotions of distress, being overwhelmed. Things were hard for him.
And it kind of went on and on for him, didn't it? It wasn't just, he didn't just have a bad 5 minutes.
No.
It just went on and on and on. That can then cause you distress.
Yeah, it wasn't just even a week out this life or a year. It wasn't just like on and on, wasn't it? From fleeing from Saul for years, and risk of death, and then having to run from his own son. He there was a lot of distress, a lot of hard times for David. So what does he do in his distress? What does David do?
Calls to the Lord.
He calls to the Lord, he calls to the Lord, which is really good for us to see that somebody, King David, somebody in his position, he calls to the Lord for his help. He knows that he cannot find that within himself.
I like how it says, I called out to my God. It's really personal.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think we see this, and we'll see it later on as well. But he calls to my God. It's not a God, it's not the God, it's my God. I think that's lovely.
How far did we get last week?
So last week we got to verse 28. That's where we finished, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Good. We're starting from
I
verse
did want to make a comment on the bits.
the bits that we're
I
going to
was
do this
looking at
week.
verses 21 to, or just a little bit after that, where he's justifying and saying his own attributes.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a different Bible to you, but the hands were clean, he's not demanding of God, he knows his laws. He's almost sort of reassuring himself that's why he's being helped by God.
Yeah, we looked at those verses. We had a little bit of a struggle, didn't we? In the sense that he was saying that he didn't do things wrong and he was sinless and things like that. And we were like, oh, how can you say that? Have you forgotten about Bathsheba and what went on with all of that? But I think we were reminded, weren't we, as we delved into it more, that actually it was talking about the fact that he understood fully how God had saved him and God had forgiven him. And he had a real sense of the fact that God had forgiven him. It was God's grace, it was God's love for him that has made him, in a sense, not a perfect person in the way that he would live, but before God, he's been made right with God because of what God has done for him. And he personally knew that saving grace, and we kind of thought about that ourselves, didn't we? Do we really personally know that and understand that saving grace that we have, that Jesus did for us on the cross? The fact that we are loved unconditionally, not because of what we do, but because of what God has done for us. So, and I think that was a real help, I think, to see that David understands that as well. So,
would you be talking about Jesus in those verses, or could you know some of the Psalms? They're like prophetic, aren't they? About, because Jesus said some of the Psalms on the cross, or at other times.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think he's referring to God, isn't he? But I don't. There's truth in there for us and Jesus in there as well.
And I think it's interesting because I think it sometimes says, doesn't it, in the New Testament about the Old Testament, that the people there were writing, and they were actually writing about Jesus. They didn't understand what they were writing about. But looking back, we can see that the amount of life that David had was, he is in effect talking about the Lord Jesus coming and rescuing, although he wouldn't have been able to put it into words because it wouldn't have
wouldn't have understood that.
And so when we read it, we think, oh my goodness me, that's really pointing to Jesus.
Yeah, whereas he sort of relates it to God, doesn't he? Whereas we can see that actually that's what Jesus has done.
Yeah.
So, right, is there any more comments on that before we look at the bit we're going to do today? No? We all good? On Zoom?
They're awfully quiet.
They are, they're all on mute. Okay, right, we're going to look at, now I have given out any little verses today, so you can just chip in and read whenever. So we're going to look at 2 Samuel chapter 22. We're going to look to right to the end of the chapter, but we're going to first of all read 2 Samuel chapter 22, verses 29 to 37. Is there anyone on Zoom that might like to read this? So it's 2 Samuel chapter 22, verses 29 to 37. Was that Carol? Did you have your hand up? Yeah, if you could read that, that'd be lovely. So 2 Samuel chapter 22, verses 29 to 37 would be lovely. Thank you, Carol.
Right, to 37. You are my lamp, O Lord. The Lord turns my darkness into light. With your help, I can advance against a troop. With my God, I can scale a wall. As for God, his way is blameless. The word of the Lord is flawless. He is a shield for all who take refuge in him. For who is God besides the Lord? And who is the rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to stand on the heights. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. You give me a shield of victory. You stoop me down to make me great. You broaden the paths beneath me so that my ankles do not turn over.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for that. So, looking at these verses, looking at verse 29, how does God describe the Lord in this verse 29?
As his lamp.
A lamp, yes, a lamp. So I remember actually, Judy, you brought this up last week, didn't you? You said, "Oh, have we done the lamp bit?" I'm doing it this week. I'm doing it this week. So he described the Lord as a lamp. So just thinking generally, and also looking at this verse here as well. What does a lamp do? It's not a trick question.
Brings light into the dark.
It brings light into the darkness, which actually says that in the psalm. Well, it is a psalm, but this passage here. So the Lord turns my darkness into light. So we all know that, don't we? We're going to the dark room. You can't see anything. As soon as you put that light on, you can see everything that you need to see.
It's like those awful toilets that you go into and there's no light switch.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to shut the door and pray that the light's going to go on automatically. It's really something.
The automatic light. I don't take to that.
It's
Quite a big thing.
Also in public areas where like stairways and things,
Yeah.
you don't have a light switch, but it comes on automatically.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go on the stairway until you see the lights on.
It's like standing outside steps to all that step.
Yeah.
Everything just like goes off so you
It can be a little
really
maze, can't it? Stand there in the dark.
Not too stealth-like.
Like a stealth bomber.
There's no one else going to everybody's toilets where there's a toilet before the lights go on.
Not really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really nice. We'll stick together, Zoe.
But the fact is, it's really good to have that light, isn't it? So when Anne goes to the toilet and the light doesn't come on, as soon as it comes on, how does that make you feel, Anne?
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. So we all know what it's like to sort of not to be able to see because of the dark. As soon as that light's on, we can see where we're going. So, of course, we can think of some other verses that relate to the light, and again, relate to Jesus as well. So, right, are we ready to do some reading? Is that all right? So, can somebody read John chapter 8 and verse 12?
Well, turn straight to it. I turn to the page. John 8, verse
Nobody
12.
knows it off by heart, but carry on reading.
Okay, shall I read it? When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.
Lovely. So that's one we know quite well, isn't it? Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And then again, it's reminding us that Jesus is the one, he's the one that shows us the way, isn't he? You know, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. You know, we can follow Jesus and we will see where we're going. He will direct our path, and he is the light of the world. Yeah, lovely. So the next verse I've got is Matthew chapter 4, verse 16. Does a Zoomer like to do that one? Matthew chapter 4, verse 16. Is there any Zoomers that want to do that? Oh, Hazel's got a hand up. Thank you, Hazel.
The people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light, and for those dwelling in the region and the shadow of death, on them a light has dawned.
Brilliant. So the people living in darkness have seen a great light. Though on those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. So again, it's a reminder that Jesus is that light, that God is that light that shines into the darkness. John chapter 9, verse 5. Someone say that one? Oh.
While I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
Okay. So while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And can somebody read Micah chapter 7, verse 8? Maybe a Zoomer, if you'd like to do that. Micah chapter 7, verse 8. Or anyone in the room?
I can, if you like.
Oh, thank you.
Is it Micah 7, verse 8?
Yeah, that's it.
Do not rejoice against me, O my enemy, for though I fall, I will rise again. When I sit in darkness, the Lord himself will be my light.
Thank you. So there again, it's relating to the Lord, isn't it? To God, that he will be my light. And one last one. Now, Peter did this one in church just a few weeks ago. So Psalm 119, verse 105.
Your light is a lamp unto my path and a light unto my feet.
Yes, yes, you've got the old version. Yeah, so your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And we reminded of that, weren't we, a few weeks ago. Yeah, so a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. So this is how David talks about the Lord, that he is a lamp.
And his word as well. So both, so the Lord himself and the word.
Yes.
And Jesus is the
And
word.
Jesus was, yeah. It's all interlinked. Yeah.
The more you see it, the more I think sometimes I think, oh, it sort of dawns on me, and I think, wow, that's amazing how it does. Like, it's obvious that it would all be linked, but when you actually see it,
Yeah, no, it's good to remind us that, isn't it? All those connections, and it helps us sort of think about that sort of the Trinity and how, the aspects. Yeah, so that's lovely to sort of see that this is how David views God, isn't it? That he is a lamp. He turns his darkness into light. So, okay, so thinking about that dark, I mean, David would have experienced some very, very dark times, wouldn't he? So where, things were, his life was, in danger, he had the emotional turmoil of his son wanting to kill him and all of that, those emotions. But he looks to God for his light. God is his light, and he remembers that. So God knows, David knows that alone he is frail. He admits this in this passage here, that he cannot stand against his enemies. But what can he do with the help of the Lord? Verse 30.
Yeah, scale a wall.
We had a little brief discussion about this before, didn't we, Zoe, and stuff. We just imagine, like, yes, I can scale a wall, like Spider-Man. I think for David to scale a wall, to be able to do that is basically, that's what he needed to do to keep him strong in his like things that you need to do when you're fighting people, I suppose, and running and things. Whereas we probably don't need to scale a wall, but there'll be other things obviously that this would relate to for us. But I think what he's saying here is that with God's help, he can advance against the troops. With my God, I can scale a wall. In other words, nothing is impossible for God. And I think that's what he's saying here. Although he is frail and he is weak, nothing is impossible for God. With God he can do.
It so depends what the wall is.
Precisely, yes. So we're thinking about that then. What sort of types of walls maybe, you don't have to be personal, it can just be general. What sort of walls would we come across, do you think? Or have we come across, or perhaps we may come across?
We're sort of really good difficulties, isn't it? I thought about yourself scaling the wall of this, and you've got a real bad time. You feel like you're getting nowhere fast. You're trying to scramble over and get to the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. So all the problems that we come across, as you say, Janet, like every person's wall is going to be different, aren't they? But again, it's important for us to remember to turn to God, because nothing is impossible for God. Maybe impossible for us, and we might think, I have no idea how I'm going to cope with this or get through this. But nothing is impossible for God.
You get the feeling as well, in the way it's said, is that it's not just about managing to creep up the wall and managing to sort of cope with it. Yes, it really is, doing it in sort of super quick time and very, very positive. Which is lovely, really, because often the things that you go through, actually, you struggle and you sort of go through the brambles rather.
Sort of can limp through it rather than, it seems here that God is really helping David to really achieve these things.
There's some expression, isn't there? You feel like you're bashing your head up against a brick wall.
Yeah, and there was another little passage in Philippians that I was thinking about as well. Philippians chapter 4, verse 30, and I'll read that out. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I think, I mean, we could look at that passage and look at it a bit more in context, but you know, the things that Paul has had to deal with in his life, he's experienced some immense and mega problems, isn't he? You know, close to death, no food, and he says in that little passage about, you know, whether he's hungry or well fed, you know, he knows that it's actually through all of these experiences, it's through God, it's through God that he's the one that gives him the strength to be able to cope with these things.
And when he was speaking before, who did he speak before? The King Agrippa and people like that. That's like scaling in a way, isn't it? If you've got something big to do.
Precisely, yeah. And God only do that. Yeah, God gave you the words to be able to speak. Yeah.
It's reminding me of the persecuted Christians of today.
Yeah.
Because they come out stronger, don't they? You know, they say we're actually very cushy here as Christians. We've got a good life.
And we can often think, how on earth can they cope with those things? Well, they can only cope with that stress.
And I was thinking, it's not about feeling that you're strong enough to do things, is it? It's just somehow trusting that if you face something that you know God wants you to face, that even though you feel you can't do it, with God you can, whatever you feel. And it's letting that kind of trust and faith in God override your feelings. And it's admitting you can't do it. I can't do it. But I'm going to trust in this situation that if I move forward, I'm going to be able to take a running jump over that wall.
Definitely, and I think sometimes actually we're supposed to feel weak. Because actually, I think when we feel strong in ourselves, we don't rely on God. But whereas when we are weak, then the only thing we can do is to rely on God, isn't it? And I think sometimes it's good for us to be weak. Yeah,
I've actually got a book at home. Its title is What I Can Scale a Wall.
Did you hear that? With God I Can Scale a Wall, there's a book. Do you know who's written the book?
I don't know at this minute unless I looked at it. It's a long time ago since I've read it. This is my book shelf. So yeah.
You let us know next week, Janet.
That's interesting. Good time.
I had a friend whose little girl had died at the age of 7, and she had another little girl of 5, and she said she lived on the mountainside, and she said to take her younger daughter, her only daughter, to school after Anne-Louise died. She would take every step and say, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And it's every step to the school that she could only do it through God. You can just imagine there's nothing else you have to do.
No, that's really helpful. Yeah. So carry on looking at these verses. How does David describe God's way and God's word? In verse 31, we look at that. How does he describe God's way and God's words?
Perfect.
Perfect, yeah. Is that you, Brina? Yeah, perfect, and I think Jan says.
Well, it's dependable in the good news.
That's acceptable. Dependable for which one? God's way or God's word?
How dependable his words?
His ways.
Perfect. Well, it says words in that.
Okay, so dependable for words, is it?
Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah.
So I've got flawless. I don't know what other people have got. So I guess
Flawless.
it's very much the same sort of thing. What have you guys got? Flawless?
Flawless.
Yeah. So it's true. You've got true. Oh my goodness. What does it say? Let's go back to the Greek. That we know how to talk about. So God's way is perfect. Have you got that? So God's ways are perfect and his word is flawless.
And therefore dependable.
Therefore dependable and trustworthy. Is that right? Yeah, so his and I think it's good to remind ourselves that he, as you said, that David's experienced some awful times, some very difficult times, and yet he's saying that God's ways are perfect. So for whatever he's gone through, God's ways are perfect. So even though he was perhaps facing some very dark and difficult times, he's acknowledging that actually God's ways are perfect. What do you feel about that? How does that,
It's okay until the next natural reason. And then that's perfect, not nice.
Perfect, yeah. So that's a really hard thing to say, isn't it? That God's ways are perfect.
We sing that song, don't we? Describe greatness.
Oh, yeah.
That's got all those words in it.
Yeah,
that's
nice. Yeah.
I suppose after all he's gone through, the trials and tribulations, it's all imperfect, if you like.
Yeah.
And now he's got, he must have been away from the Lord at times, and I feel he's acknowledging that God's way is perfect.
Yeah.
Because I go off my own way, it's very easy to do that. Isn't it?
Yeah, but God's ways are perfect, yeah.
It's the difference between we know that, don't we? We know it in our heads that we need to be well, as in the way around. But sometimes it's that conflict between what we know and what in our hearts that we just the more we trust in the more that grows, doesn't it? That's a big constant thing, isn't it?
Yeah. When things don't go the way that we are, or some very difficult things come our way, it's very hard to think of. Therefore, that's God's perfect way for us.
I don't think we've got I think we've got to be honest. It's a struggle, isn't it? It's a struggle.
Yeah.
If things are not going the way we want to see God's ways.
And it's hard to say this to the outside world, because it doesn't seem
No,
there are
it
many
doesn't.
things, and not only can you see rather callous of it. Oh, God's ways. No, it doesn't feel it.
I think because we struggle with this, like we live in an imperfect world and we're imperfect, so but God's ways are perfect. It's very so that's hard.
You've got to be careful how you handle it as well, haven't
Yeah.
you? Because I think to come out with this in a sort of packed way, I think justifiably people could want to focus on the notes.
Yeah. And I think that's where it is helpful when we look at David and the fact that what he was experiencing was awful things, isn't it? Awful heart-wrenching problems and difficulties. So he's not saying, therefore, he says God's ways are perfect, so therefore I feel okay about everything. I think that's the thing, isn't it?
And it doesn't mean to say he didn't know really deep sadnesses.
No. Well, it talks about this turmoil, doesn't it? And this, last week, I can't remember the exact word, this sort of turmoil of emotions as well as, physically feeling tired and exhausted. And then we've got these words here, haven't we? He shields all who take refuge in him. And I just think that is such a lovely way to think. He shields all who take refuge in him. Again, it's a reminder, isn't it, that we have to come to God. That it is only God that we can find refuge and help and strength. When we are weak, it's only in him. And we might still feel weak in that taking refuge in him, but he's the one that we can depend upon. He's the only consistent person, isn't he?
And he knows, doesn't he? He knows when we're struggling and we're struggling with his ways. Yes. And I think that's when it's especially close to us. And we'll help.
God is a safe place. So how does David describe God and what he does in verses 32 to 37? How does David describe God? And again, it's good to sort of point ourselves to God, isn't it? Looking to shout out some of these things.
A strong refuge.
A strong refuge, yeah.
God gives him the strength and also trains him.
Yeah,
He trains
yeah.
my hands. So that's what-
Yeah. So I was thinking with that, he trains my hands for battle. It's like he physically helps him, doesn't he, as well? Yeah, any other things there?
I think that verse 32 is quite interesting. Who is the rock except our God? Because I think sometimes we can look in different places for help and comfort, can't we? It's a little bit like Peter, you know, when everyone was deserting Jesus, and Peter said, well, where can we go? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm sure sometimes there are times in our lives when that's what we feel. That, you know, the Lord isn't doing perhaps what I want him to do, but where else have I got to go? Because everything else, every other so-called rock is going to crumble under us.
Yeah, there's no one like God, is there? You know, there's only one God, isn't there?
In the good news, which is quite, it puts it quite well, I think. The Lord alone is God. God alone is our defense.
Yeah.
So it emphasizes there's nothing else.
No, there's one God.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we mentioned that he gives us strength. He gives us security as well and keeps my way secure. And then this whole sort of way that he physically helps. How does he physically, how has God physically helped David in particular?
So can I say something about verse 34? Where it says he makes my feet like the feet of the deer and calls me to stand on the heights. Now, I heard a talk on this once, and apparently when a deer is climbing up a rock, it puts its front 2 feet, whatever they are, up first, and then the hind feet follow into the place where the first feet were. So all the time the hind feet are going into a place that's been tested and is secure. So if you think of that here, I mean, that actually helps us, so David is saying he makes his feet like the feet of a deer. So David's feet, only 2 feet, can go into the steps almost like of where God has previously been, and he knows it's secure. I don't know if that makes sense, but you kind of get this picture that, God has gone before us, Christ has gone before us. And when we put our feet where he's put his feet, we're secure.
That's really helpful, to think of that. Yeah, it's basically God has prepared the way, isn't it? And when David felt physically tired, God has given him feet of a deer, sort of that. You feel it like leaping around, sort of that energy as well. I don't know. Do you? I don't know. No, the deer makes it look quite easy, doesn't it?
John was talking about a book. There was a very famous Christian book that people used to read years ago called Hind's Feet on High Places. By Hannah someone.
Yes, I read it.
Hannah Hernard.
Again.
What was that? Who is it?
Hannah Hernard.
Hannah Hernard.
Yeah, I've read that as well.
There you go.
It was compulsory reading for Christians many years ago. The thing is, that sort of like hope to follow truly, something. That one. And Jesus on the footsteps. Yes.
Are we going to sing it?
Let's all sing the same tune.
Make up our own tune. Okay. So it also deals with there that God's help is like a shield, David. It's protection, isn't it, as well? And it is with God's help that David has been made this great king and this great warrior. God has provided a way for David. You see it in verse 37, don't we? Showing him the way that Again, here we kept strong.
I like that thing about so my ankles do not turn.
Yeah.
It's like an age thing.
Yeah.
Oh God, there, sort of taking the stones out of path, making it a bit wider.
Keeping the
So it was
nice and
you can socially distance and still not turn my ankles.
Oh, right. So we're going to look at the next little bit. So 2 Samuel chapter 22, verses 38 to 46. Does anybody want to read that?
I really like it. I've actually got the Living Bible.
Okay.
So it might be slightly different.
That's
So
all right. 38 to 46. Yeah.
not too much different.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah. I have chased my enemies and destroyed them. I did not stop till all were gone. I have destroyed them so that none can rise again. They have fallen beneath my feet. For you have given me strength for the battle and have caused me to subdue all those who rose up against me. You have made my enemies turn and run away. I have destroyed them all. They looked in vain for help. They cried to God, but he refused to answer. I beat them into dust. I crushed and scattered them like dust along the streets. You have preserved me from my rebellious people. You have preserved me as the head of nations. Foreigners shall serve me and shall quickly submit to me. When they hear of my power, they shall lose heart and come trembling from their hiding places. The Lord lives, blessed be my rock. Praise to him, the rock of my salvation.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Right, okay. So looking at those verses, can you sum them up for me?
Oh my.
So can you sum up these verses? Just kind of, I was thinking that as we read through this, it's almost like you have different verses in the song. Do you get a different feel? Different little bits, and this is probably where we split them up ourselves. Sort of have a different little emphasis and a different one bit's praising God, one bit's thanking God for something else, or yeah. So it's like a little different verses.
It's like as God gave him, he took and acted on it.
Yeah.
So each one's a little couplet, isn't it? You gave me, and then I did.
Yes, it is, isn't it? So it kind of like really talks about all those the way that David destroyed his enemies, isn't it? And he crushed his enemies. It talks about, I think it says crush them, because it was God that had given him strength. And I thought what was interesting in verse 40, it says, "You armed me with strength. You humbled me, humbled my adversaries. You made my enemies turn their backs in flight." You know, and then in 44 again, "You have delivered me. You have preserved me." And I think he's always looking at God, isn't it? You did this, you did it. I didn't do it, but actually it's God that did it. And he acknowledges that throughout, which I found really helpful. That sort of emphasis on you did that. So, right, we're going to look into the next, because that we don't need to unpack that unless you've got any more thoughts on that. I thought that's probably summed that up.
I just thought 44 was a bit sad, really, because you delivered me from the attacks of my people. So the attacks didn't come on, we know that anyway, don't we? So many of David's attacks were actually by his own people. And then the final analysis by his own family.
I know.
So it's just,
Yeah, it's a very personal thing. So let's look at the last little bit. So we've just got verses 47 to 50, 51 even. Does somebody on Zoom want to read that?
I'll do it if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
The Lord lives. Praise be to my rock. Exalted be my God, the rock, my saviour. He is the God who avenges me, who puts the nations under me, who sets me free from my enemies. You exalted me above my foes. From a violent man you rescued me. Therefore I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing the praises of your name. He gives his king great victories. He shows unfailing kindness to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what, again, it's a little bit summing up. What is David doing in these verses? He's praising, yeah. It's really praising God, isn't it? It's a lovely way to sort of finish this song, really. What sorts of things is he praising God for? Looking at those verses.
Victory over his enemies.
Yeah, victory over his enemies, yeah.
Protection.
Protection, yeah, yeah.
And no one can tell David that God isn't real, can they? I just like the way he starts that off. The Lord lives. You know, there's no point saying David, it's all in your mind.
Yeah. He talks a lot about rock, doesn't he? That comes up a few times in this chapter, doesn't he? That he's praise be to my rock, you know, God that he can depend upon, isn't it?
My verse 50 is quite nice. It says, "No wonder I give thanks to you, O Lord." That's quite a nice way of saying it. You know, I've got to.
And verse 51, he shows constant love to the one he has chosen, which is applicable to us as well.
Yeah, it's constant love, isn't it? And in my version, it's got unfailing kindness. Yeah, which is lovely, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that talking about Jesus again?
Yeah.
So it shows well, I suppose, because it says it shows unfailing kindness to his anointed, which I suppose is that referring to David as his anointed?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Because Jesus
Forever. Yeah. Does someone say something? Yeah, so it probably is, related to both, isn't it? I mean, well, there's descendants, because obviously it's from David.
To David and his descendants forever.
You know, we all know that Jesus came from the line of David. So so it's something. So that's the end of chapter 22. We're going to have. I was thinking it would be really nice to have a bit of time just to pray and just sort of think about these things. Oh, you know, they're always thinking that the study will be today. So we will. Yes, let's see, Mike, sneak out. So what I'm going to do is quickly find something on here, which I'm going to share the screen, and I'm just going to. So actually, this is something that we don't have to do now. We could always do it later. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see that on Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, what have I done now? Oh, what have I done with it? Where's it gone? There we go. So just so maybe we can go away and think about these things, and then we'll just have a little bit of time of prayer. But also for those that are listening to the recording, this is something you can do as well. So just to ask ourselves, have there been times in our lives that we have turned to God for strength and have acknowledged acknowledging our need for Him? So have we? There might be specific times. I mean, I hope in a sense we do it every day. You know, look to God for our strength. But there may be particular times in your life that there may be times when you've really had to depend on God. So maybe just sort of thinking about that, and then also, and this is something that we can do either now or later on. Write out a prayer, almost like a song, like David's done here. You don't have to be so poetic. On the way that God is our refuge and our strength. You know, as we look at perhaps 2 Samuel 22 and thinking about and reflecting on how God has given us that person. So it's a personal prayer, looking at our situation and how God has given us that strength and that God is our refuge. So I have got bits of paper here. So you guys at home that are listening to this recording, so maybe that's something that you guys could do as well. So what I'm going to do now is just take this away, stop the share, and I'm going to stop the recording. So Do we want to say goodbye to everyone?
Bye.
Bye. Say goodbye to